Hello and welcome to an edition of What Does the Giraffe Say Media with me, Kathleen Ritorne. We're an organisation that aims to connect people in conservation by holding live interviews on social media. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by Susie Weeks from the Mount Kenya Trust Foundation, and she's going to be talking all about her industry, her country, her conservation. So before we get started, Susie, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in conservation, and also how the Mount Kenya Trust became about.
Okay, so I'm Susie Weeks, the Executive Director of Mount Kenya Trust. I grew up here in Kenya, and my passion really started with it's such a beautiful country. It has such amazing nature and wildlife and landscapes, very, very diverse. And that was always the driving force. And Kenyan people are wonderful, wonderful people. I was born up in this area where Mount Kenya is, but then moved to the coast, and always thought I would end up in some kind of marine conservation job. But I found my way back to the mountain from sea level, and here I am. The trust was started in 1999. There was more and more awareness that the 2 decades previously had caused horrible destruction to the mountain, and that destruction was going on unchecked. So the founding trustees, following a big survey, decided that they wanted to help the local government agencies to do something about this. So that's how it started. And then within a year of it being set up, I was employed to run the trust when it was very, very small and very young.
And so you mentioned there briefly, as you were talking about the fact that there was a lot of damage that was being done in that area. Was this something that has been happening over time, or was something that shifted? What was the situation there?
I think it happened over time. Like many areas, I think, population just gone rising and then unchecked and not very well managed by the then Kenya Forest Department, which is a new agency now, which was renamed and revamped. And frankly, just a government that was really not focused on preserving these very, very precious areas for biodiversity. A lot of encroachment was happening, and it was just really going unchecked. And the focus from the forestry side of things was really on commercial forestry, rather than doing a little bit of both, the commercial forestry and then focusing on forest conservation. The logging, the charcoal burning that was happening in that period, as well as poaching, was just rife. And 99 marked a sort of new era of realizing what we've got and how quickly you can lose it.
For sure. And for those who aren't really aware about the uniqueness of Mount Kenya, can you explain a little bit about the area itself, the terrain, why it is so special?
Yeah, so if you've never seen Mount Kenya or been to the area before, it will sort of blow you away to come to this area. You can't sort of drive past those peaks and the rolling, beautiful, gleaming forests without wanting to almost pull over and take a step back and really feel like this is the heart of the country. It's important for its biodiversity. It's a World Heritage Site, so it's recognized for its biodiversity and its ecosystem services. All mountain ecosystems are so very important to the nations that they're in because of the biodiversity, but also the water catchments that they serve to people in the general area, but also much, much further afield.
The location that you're in means, it's absolutely stunning. I haven't had the pleasure of ever going, but I have seen pictures, so I'll have to do with that for now. But there's a lot of humans that are living around there, and you mentioned earlier there's a lot of encroachment and that kind of things. Now, I imagine with a lot of humans being in that area alongside a lot of wildlife, there's going to be some conflict there. What is it that you guys do to try and combat that? And what sort of conflicts are you seeing? What are the kind of traditional things that you see on a regular basis?
Yeah, so the biggest problem is usually human-elephant conflict. Obviously, elephants are very large; they need large ranges. Mount Kenya is one of the most densely populated elephant ranges in the entire region, as is the Aberdares, which is our sort of sister mountain range. The area is vast; it's huge. I mean, to put it in perspective, we're talking about, once you talk about the lower forest areas coming up to the bamboo areas and then up to the moorlands and the peaks, the whole area is well beyond 2,300 square kilometers. So we're talking about a very, very large area to keep an eye on. So the boundary obviously is big, and the corridors that elephants were using to get down to the lower areas are slowly being closed off by development, by densely populated area. Obviously, all mountain ecosystems are densely populated around their foothills because mountains bring rainfall, rich soils, and so agriculture is always going to be, intensified in those areas. So the problems that you have once you start sort of having a lot of development and lots of small and large farming areas is that you're cutting off those natural migration routes for elephants, but you're also providing them with a delicious array of cabbages and other snacks that they really rather like. And so farmers who are living right on the edges of those boundaries are, really struggle. It's a livelihood issue. It's a safety issue. And there's, enormous amounts of conflict. People get hurt. Elephants get killed. Sometimes people get killed. And in terms of addressing some of those issues, we, in conjunction with the Kenya Wildlife Service, the Kenya Forest Service, and other partners, we began in the early years putting in two-strand elephant fences, which are electrified. They allow people in, they allow smaller wildlife out, but they didn't allow elephant in. But as we know, elephant are highly intelligent, and those fences slowly over time are, I like to say that elephants come across those early fence designs and go, that is so 2004. So now there's a wonderful organization called Rhino Ark, and they are working with KFS and KWS, that's the Wildlife Service and the Forest Service, to fence the entire mountain to mitigate these conflicts. And they are about halfway through. So we work very closely with them. We have a lot of overlapping projects, but also projects of our own. But the fact that Rhino Ark has come to do this entire fence, which is a proper game-proof fence to protect people, but also to protect elephants, is really, really going to help over time. And then, of course, once you've mitigated the problem of elephants moving out of these protected areas, you've got the problem where you're keeping them in, which is where our corridor project comes in.
We'll touch on that project in a minute. As you were talking, it made me a little bit curious. So is the biggest threat to elephants where you are, is it the conflict with humans, or do you also have issues with ivory poaching as well?
Less and less so with ivory poaching. Human-elephant conflict is a growing problem and continues to be a conundrum that people are going to have to work on and step up on. It's so I would like to say between 2009 and 2014, that was a period where, as you know, elephant poaching all over Africa just really spiked. But thankfully, since then, things have really, really reduced on that front, and our issues mainly about human wildlife conflict, climate change, and just pressure on those protected areas.
Yeah, I understand. Now, you touched on it earlier, and it's something that you should rightly be quite proud of. And that's one of the elephant corridors that you guys have helped to be part of, to try and allow these elephants to be able to travel. Because, as you quite rightly said, you know, if you start fencing these animals in, then you're going to start getting more and more conflict. They've essentially got a free buffet of farmer food if they're not moving around and can't go to their natural places. So can you talk to us a little bit about the corridor, how that worked? I imagine that must have been a huge undertaking to try and get that in process, and where it goes and how it helps.
Okay, so yes, we spearheaded it, but there were many partners involved. Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, a very famous conservancy to our north, was very much part of the design. And there are two large arable farms between the Mount Kenya forest and the Ngarrindjeri forest. And they realize that they are, you know, have historically been part of the problem, you know, more and more fences going in, wheat farms. And thankfully, they were very much on board to sort of help reverse some of the, these restrictions that are being put in place for elephants and bull elephants, frequently leaving the forest, going into people's small holding farms, into these larger farms as well. But they have more of ability to say, listen, we can make space for the elephants. So the corridor allows elephants, through fencing, allows elephants from the southern end of the mountain through Marania Farm and Kasima Farm all the way through to the Ngarrindjeri forest. Now, once they get to the Ngarrindjeri forest, they can move quite freely from Lewa to Barana and other areas to the north. So areas that are connected. So it basically reopened a historical route for elephants. And yes, it took years to raise the money and design it and figure out what we were going to do about crossing roads. And there were a lot of naysayers. A lot of people said it couldn't be done, that the elephants wouldn't go through these valleys, that they wouldn't go through an underpass. But we pressed on, and in the end of 2010, that we opened the corridor, joined the fences to the underpass. And the first elephant went through an underpass the very next day, on New Year's Day.
And what did the naysayers say now? Do they recognise that actually it did work? And do you think it could be used as an example for other countries and other areas to use that same process?
Absolutely, and we get phone calls all the time about, you know, how it was designed, what kind of fence specs we used, and the underpasses. There definitely we get a lot of interest, people coming to see the corridor from Uganda and Tanzania, and yeah, lots of phone calls and interest in how it was done.
And one of the things that your organisation does and does very well is work very closely alongside the local communities. Have they seen a difference, one, since that corridor has been put in place, but I know as well also you do a lot of community outreach and education. Has there been a change in attitudes? What kind of things are you seeing, and what kind of things do you still need to work on?
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen that. I've been with the trust long enough to see a different attitude, and we strongly believe that you can't make conservation projects work without working with the local community. It's just not a possibility. It's, the forest belongs to the people who live on its boundaries. The catchment area belongs to the whole country, but it is, very difficult if you've got a very small subsistence farm to feel any sentiment at all towards wildlife if it's affecting your livelihood. So putting in the corridor obviously meant that we have to fence quite a large area to also funnel the elephants in. But the upside for the local farmers of having this safe space for elephants to move north and south, it changes things overnight. raises the value of people's land over time, but overnight you know that your crops are going to be more secure. In drier seasons you're going to have more problems, maybe they do break out of the fence, but nothing like the constant invasion, I would say, of farms when elephants pretty much can go anywhere.
And you do a lot of work as well with the local schools. How do the children normally, how do they normally see elephants? Do they see them as something bad because that's always been something that's been a threat to their livelihoods, or are they starting to look at it in a different way? And how do you change that?
So it's actually surprising how different some communities can be that aren't that far away from other communities in terms of their view of elephants and wildlife. It can be cultural, but it also can be that that there are some areas, for example, the Amenti Forest, which joins onto Mount Kenya, where it's so densely populated with elephants and has been so disturbed by humans that the conflict is very, very high. So if you speak to children or adults in that area, you'll find that their view of conservation of elephants is it's really low. They've had so many problems, but there are other areas where there might not be much of a view on it, as long as people feel that they can get help with mitigating conflict. But it definitely seen it change over time, and there's just more awareness generally, and we continue to bring that awareness to people and bring a message of that we're all trying to live alongside each other, and that's the goal. That if there have to be, with projects, there have to be benefits on both sides: benefits to the forest, benefits to wildlife, and benefits to people.
And kind of switching away from elephants a little bit there, and kind of going back into the forest as well. That's a very important ecosystem that you have there, but it is also under, again, a lot of pressure, mostly due to humans. So you have a lot of problems with illegal logging, charcoal production, illegal grazing of livestock, fires, all of these kind of things that are diminishing the forest. What is the impact that you're seeing here? Has there been an improvement? Is it getting worse? How are you seeing the situation play out in terms of the land itself?
So we have always had fires on Mount Kenya, and historically there have always been fires, but we are seeing very, very evident climate change impacts very, very quickly over the last, very evident over the last 4 or 5 years, and the fires getting worse, more intense. We'll have a dry season, for example, where it's just that hot and windy that the tiniest spark is going to really go off and ignite. And on top of that, we have livestock pressure from the northern areas, from the pasturous areas, that of the likes we've never seen before. So that just brings the fire risk and the habitat risk and the risk to forests even greater. So we've seen quite a lot of changes over time of where the threats are coming from, and that's the biggest worry at the moment, I would say, is the pressure from livestock and fires.
And then how do you combat that? Do you have a team that go out, or is it the government that will send the fire brigades out? What happens when a fire starts there?
It's really tough. It's really tough. I can't tell you. We had very, very little in the way of fire prevention. We have still very little in the way of fire prevention. In 2019, all the teams from the Kenya Forest Service, our teams, Rhino Arc teams, and the Kenya Wildlife Service were sort of trying to literally fighting fires with pangas, just machetes, just trying to cut down the brush, making literally at the last minute some fire beaters, which is basically a rubber flap on a stick. Really, really intense fires, trying to fight it with very, very little knowledge. in areas where you can't really get to with a vehicle, terrain that means that people just getting people to the fires. We're talking walking for 3-4 hours. I mean, my heart goes out to everybody every time we have a fire, and we're sending people out there with so little equipment. Since then, we have managed to train 60 firefighters. And as I speak, we're having a refresher course right now. And to see people in proper PPE, to see people with some equipment after that, after what we watched in 2012 and 2019, is wonderful. But it does mean that the pressure is always on those trained guys. Most of them are Mount Kenya Trusts. And that the funding that we have to bring in to give people rations to keep them safe, or to launch aircraft from a private company who has been enormously helpful to us, means we have to find the money between Rhino Ark and Kenya Trust. We have to find the money there and then. There isn't a kitty. We are reaching out, and the government system, sadly, they just can't get funding on the ground in time. So we end up actually sort of running with those agencies that the firefighting missions, which are incredibly hard. And if you don't get on them very, very quickly, you end up fighting them for weeks, if not months.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing this more and more, not just in Kenya, but around the world. The fire risks are just becoming another level. I know with some organisations I was dealing with in Europe, they were having fires that were raging well out of control, and they were lasting far longer, far hotter, and going far further. And I think this is something that we need to kind of be aware of going forward, that this isn't going to change. We need to start having ways that we can combat that. And then kind of switching back again then to when we were talking about like the illegal grazing and the logging and the charcoal. How is that seen by the governments? Do they take that seriously, or is it a case of it's more people that are trying to survive in tough times, or is it done on a big industrial scale?
I think that, there's a little bit of both. And the agencies that I've mentioned, they try really hard, but to be honest, and they completely okay with me saying this. I've worked with them all for many years, and there's some amazing people, obviously, who work with KWS and KFS. They simply don't have the resources when things are coming in on a big scale, if there's a crisis. And a lot of, there's going to be that sort of humanitarian side of, this is a really big drought. We have to turn a blind eye with people if they really need to move their cattle. But it's just getting to such a large scale that something really is going to have to be done if we want to preserve this mountain and everything that it brings to people for a very long time.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I know all the topics that we've just been discussing. Conservation can get notoriously difficult. It can get a little bit bleak. It can be one step forward, two steps back. There's tough times when you're having big fires, or there's elephants that have been killed, or there's humans that have been injured. How do you stay motivated, and how do you keep positive when sometimes it can feel a little bit too much? And what advice would you give to others?
I stay positive because my team is so incredible, and they give me, I can't tell you how I feel about them. They give me so much of my passion back every day when things seem hard. They are incredible people, and just the importance of Mount Kenya, what it means to Kenya as a nation. It's very, very hard to let go. Have to remind myself, but it doesn't take long for me to remind myself that we're all in it together. My team, the rangers we work with from all the agencies, that we are doing absolutely everything we can. And it's not just about preserving some wildlife and looking after a few trees. This is about an incredibly important ecosystem that has repercussions for everybody in this country.
For sure. And that kind of slides nicely into my next question as well, because congratulations, you recently became first runner-up for the conservation team in the African Conservation Awards. Why do you think your team stood out? I know I can tell you're obviously incredibly passionate about them. I just would love to know what it is that you think that made them stand out against all the rest of the competition. And then kind of following on from that, what does that award mean to your guys?
I think they stand out. We stand out because we really have a passionate approach to doing things in a holistic way. You know, we've even gone into healthcare and family planning and things that people wouldn't think as obvious conservation programs. Because we like to put people in the center, and our management teams, the people who manage all the projects, really are exactly the right people for each of those projects. The education team, the community health team, the forest restoration team, and we do a lot of forest restoration. And it all comes in together, and it all interlinks and overlaps. And I just think that we just give each other a lot of time to help each other and work with each other. I'm always so proud when I see, you know, there's so many organizations where you just see a driver just sitting in the car waiting for everything to get done. We all muck in with everything, and that's one of our biggest strengths.
Yeah, you're an incredible organization, and I'm so impressed with the work that you're doing and the changes that you're making. When you told the team that they'd become first runner-up, what was their reaction? Were they pleased? Does it help give them motivation to keep coming on, to keep going on, to feel like they're recognized, like not just in Kenya but elsewhere as well?
Yeah, absolutely. They're incredibly excited about it. I think there are so many organizations that are, you know, undersung, and it just to get that recognition and to know that we, you know, that it was announced that we are a really great team at the Ranger Congress. I think, you know, you can sometimes feel so squished into your little area of expertise or what you're doing, and I think it feels really good to just get the word out there and feel recognized for everything that the team does.
And I think as well, there's so many different conservation organizations all doing different things in different countries, focusing on different topics and subjects and aspects of conservation. It's a huge kind of a huge banner to be put under. So to be able to stand out in there is actually very difficult. And I know you, as you mentioned yourself, you're not a massive organization. You work alongside other organizations. How can people, if they're watching this, how can they help support the work that you're doing and try and raise a bit more awareness so people are aware of the work that you're doing?
So the obvious ones, like following us on our social media platforms, looking in a little bit more to, you know, what Mount Kenya means to Kenya. We have obviously there are ways to donate. You can go to our website, spreading the word, asking people to follow us. We have an annual mountain bike challenge, which happens at the end of February every year. And that's the website is just about to open entries, well, towards the end of November anyway, and the dates have been set. If you're interested in coming to Kenya to do an incredible bike race and see some of the landscapes I've been talking about, everybody who's ever come from overseas or from other parts of Africa have always said it's one of the best things they've ever done. And I'm slightly biased, but I tend to agree.
So you mentioned just in the mountain bike challenge. What's the challenge involve?
So there's a number of different races and challenges just to suit everyone. We've always tried to keep it a very, very sort of family orientated affair, as well as something that's some hardcore very seasoned mountain bikers can get involved in. There's 2-day races, there's races for kids, there's a whole day of races for kids under 12, as well as from 10 and up on the main race day.
And is that just based in Kenya, or can people take place remotely?
We did actually, during COVID, we did a virtual one, and we will probably consider doing that for this coming year as well.
Thanks. I've just pulled up the website, the link for the challenge underneath, and I'm now just about to pull up the link for your website. So please do head over, and you'll see all the social links on there as well. So do give them a like, follow, share. The more awareness you can raise, the more we can do to help keep these organisations going. So I only have one more question left. And if you have a question back home and you'd like to put it to Susie, please pop it in the comments and I will do exactly that. If you're watching this and it's not live, you're watching this later on and you still have a question, please do pop it in the comments section and one of us will be able to come back to you with an answer. And so I was wanting to know, Susie, what's next for the Mount Kenya Trust?
We are, obviously the COVID years have been a bit tough, to say the least. But we are looking at doing a whole new strategy for next year. But our current dream is to set up a big community centre where people can come, where young people can come, where people can come for their for health checks, where we can hold training sessions for either our rangers or other people. We want to share the knowledge we have, and we want to ensure that there is somewhere for especially the youth and young women to come and either learn some skills or take some part in some training. So that's our current dream that we've been talking about in the office.
That sounds incredible. I'll be watching that and cheering you guys on for sure. We have a question coming on from Winnie. Hi, Winnie. She is a regular watcher of the show. Always absolutely lovely to see you. And she's asking, is there any one thing that would help you with what you do? For example, more vehicles, more rangers, or is it just more funds that you need?
I think, yeah, it's I think on the firefighting, funds for fire prevention are a big one, but keeping the boots on the ground, you know, if you haven't got if people can't help much, keeping boots on the ground doesn't actually cost that much. Keeping vehicles running obviously is getting more and more difficult, but you know, every little thing from us being able to keep people training to just keeping our rangers secure and well equipped is always really important. If we can keep the men on the ground in a manner in which they are well taken care of, then even every little bit helps. Yeah.
And is there ways, so we pulled up your website earlier, is there links there that people can go to that they can be able to help and donate whatever they can?
Absolutely. And I'm more than happy for my email address to be shared for any comments and questions and inquiries.
And do you also, so I know a lot of organisations I deal with, they're normally very small teams. Fundraising is obviously a huge issue that they need to face, but also the fact that you're unable to employ large amounts of staff. So, for example, people doing your social media or your finances or your fundraising. Are there ways for people to get involved in terms of like volunteering their time and their skills?
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't have a formal system, but we do welcome any inquiries about, you know. But at the moment, I'm doing with Charlene, our incredible monitoring and evaluation officer, doing a lot of all the reporting and writing, and we are looking at seeing if we can get anybody to help with the grant writing and the communication side of things. So there are certain skills, if people are good at those and have the time, we welcome you to get in touch with us.
And we have a question coming through from Neville, which kind of follows on a little bit from that. And he's asking, do you offer volunteer programs for young Kenyans?
From time to time, we do take on interns, and but we haven't really got a formal program. But we do welcome people to get in touch and see if they want to come and help with tree planting, for example, during the tree planting season. Please do get in touch.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Susie. I've absolutely loved talking to you. It's been fascinating to hear all about the work that you guys are doing and the challenges you are having to combat. And so thank you so much for taking the time for coming onto the show. We've had some lovely comments as we've been talking, lots of support from all around the world cheering you on. So that's absolutely lovely to see. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we say goodbye?
No, just thank you for having me, and thank you very much for your interest in Mount Kenya Trust. Everybody who's listened, yeah, we're going to keep going and we're going to keep strong. Take care, all of you.
Thank you so much. And as we mentioned earlier, please do follow their pages, like, share, comment. The more people that see it, the more people that we can raise awareness for, and the more work that we can do. If you've enjoyed this show, then please as well give it a like, comment and share. Again, it all helps to raise awareness of all the different organisations that are doing incredible work to help protect our wildlife and wild species. So thank you so much, Susie. And for me, enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, thanks.